So we're going to be cutting out linings now, and to simplify things for you, we're going to be cutting out linings as close to the panels that we've struck out as possible. This usually wouldn't happen in a traditional tailoring setting, and there are a variety of ways by which you could go about it, but this is the most simplified and sort of efficient way to learn and remember. So to start off with positioning your panels, you need to position your forepart. Make sure you're using the correct side against the wrong side of the cloth. That is to say, make sure that if you are working on a left jacket, you are cutting out a left lining forepart. So consider the right side and the wrong side of your lining, and the right side and the wrong side of the top cloth that you're laying on top, to make sure that what it will be facing the interior will be the correct side. So here we have the wrong side of the lining facing us and the right side of the cloth facing us, in order to make sure that the orientation of the lining within the coat will be correct. Again, this isn't something that you would ever have to think about if you were making a full jacket, because you'd be cutting out this lining on the fold. Now we've unfolded this so that you can get a more efficient layout of it, but again, this is never something that's done. Typically speaking, you would cut two panels in one single go. So to start off with, if you lay your forepart into the lining and position your front button on the selvage edge, you won't need the front section here of lining, because the lining in the coat will sit back from the facing all the way up. So we get a little bit more efficient just by using this touch here. Now we're going to cut this to the bottom, and we're going to cut all the way up. Now you can weight this, or you can be very careful with not manipulating it. We're going to cut all the way up the forepart. Once you get to the wedge, flip this and cut a straight line into the waist, and continue going up. Now I'm cutting an 1/8 bigger than my forepart. Cutting slightly bigger is always safer. And then I'm going to head all the way up to about 1 inch past my shoulder inlay, and then I'm going to cut 1 inch across to meet the shoulder point. And then for reference, I'm going to make little notches, one chest notch and one waist notch, just so I know where to line up the coat. And that is your forepart lining done. The next stage is your side body. Again, remain efficient, reposition this as you need to. Same principle coming up the underarm seam. Notch at the waist, notch at the chest, and then around here I'm going to leave myself 1.5 inches over the armhole, and I'm just going to tie that into the top of the inlay at the top of the side body. I'm going to leave about 1/4 inch coming in through there. Coming through the bottom, I'm going to trim to the same length. And then coming in past the side seam, I'm going to leave a good 1/2 inch to 3/4 inch. Again, I'm going to notch at the waist and notch at the chest, so I know vaguely where I'm at. One clever thing to do before you start taking apart your panels here would be to mark the wrong size and make sure that you aren't sewing together opposite panels. So we'll do that in a second. So on the top sleeve, again, being as efficient as I can, making sure that the grain of the sleeve is the same as the grain as the lining. I'm cutting the bottom of the cuff, and then the same, an 1/8 in on the forearm. I'm then continuing that up about a good 2 inches further, all the way around the top sleeve. Like so. I'm going to notch. And then I'm going to do exactly the same over here, leaving myself the same amount as on my cloth. Again, notching at the chest. Yes. Make sure you've got your pieces the right way around, and not like I have. So we'll do the back first. So the back would usually be cut out on the fold and would sit back from the folded edge, imagining rather than this being a selvage edge, this being the fold edge. The back would sit back, the width of the inlay, sorry, the centre back would sit back, the width of the inlay back from the fold edge, so like so. And then you would sew a seam down there to form a pleat, which would allow for a bit of ease within the lining, so that the coat cloth was not disturbed by any tightness there. Now, because we're cutting this out in an effective manner, and we're only working on a half jacket, we're going to mimic the fold by folding the lining back about 2.5 inches and creating that fold. We're then going to lay the inlay into the fold, like so. Just crease the fold in. And cut out the back. Now, we cut out the back about 1 inch higher at the back neck. And carry that through to the back shoulder. I leave about 1/2 inch past the back shoulder, up until the point where I get to the section where it meets the side body, and then I'm an 1/8 in all the way. For the sake of ease, there are places here that you would be able to not cut your linings quite the same, but we're going to simplify the process so that it's easy for you to remember. Just cut this out in the same shape. So here what I need to do is with the chalk begin marking my back pleat. I'm going to mark my centre back seam, and the bottom of my centre back seam, and I'm going to mark my waist position. I'm also going to mark where my fold edge is, just by laying a little bit of chalk into the crease. Again, notch at the chest, at the waist, and last the undersleeve.
Is that canteen open? Do anyone want a coffee?
No, we're good, thank you.
Ensuring that you have enough room at the top for those 2 inches that you need to leave around the arm. So an 1/8 in at the forearm seam. Two inches up, all the way around. Around 1 inch on top here, and the same width, an 1/8 out, going down behind arm. Notch. And that's it. So in this instance, our linings have a very different colour between right and wrong sides, but that might not always be the case, so it's always judicious to mark the wrong sides. With an X. Now you don't need to mark the orientation because you know what the panels are looking like, but to ensure that you're not putting the wrong side of the lining space up, everything is marked. When you're folding these up, make sure that the side that won't be visible in the coat is the one that sits on the outer layers. Be very careful of linings, particularly Irmesines. They will water stain, so when you're working with them, make sure that there's nothing on the table that could possibly create a mark. And when you're using the irons, preferably use a dry iron. If your iron spits steam at the point at which you're pressing the linings, you'll never be able to get that stain out. So if you now take your lining bundle, grab the sleeves and lay your undersleeve out, we are quickly going to mark on the right side of the cloth your undersleeve roll. So match up your notches. Lay a couple of weights down. And just run a line down on the right side of your line. That's the wrong side of my lining, my apologies. Redo that. Oh no, that was the right side. All good. At this point, grab your top sleeve, lay it in right side to right side on your undersleeve, match up your notches. Your notches here don't need to be as precisely matched up. I mean, you need to match them up precisely, but they can be out of sync. They just need to be vaguely in the same area. It can be out by a small quarter of an inch, that's fine. We're not talking here about creating fit issues if they don't line up, because your linings get filled into your coat and their pattern is essentially established as you're sewing them in. So the notches are there to give you a vague indication as to where they need to line up. Once you've done that, reverse your sleeve and line up your top sleeve into the new line that you've just traced. Raw edge against that new chalk mark. Now we're going to create a fake cuff in this coat. So we're going to be sewing all the way down the lining in the sleeve. But if you were to make a working cuff, we would typically leave a little vent opening for us to be able to access the buttonholes. Right. So now that's pinned in place. What we're going to do is we're going to sew three-eighths of an inch inside of this edge and three-eighths of an inch inside of this one. Now grab your forepart and your side body. Again, laying them in right side to right side. Make sure you grab the right pieces and don't accidentally grab your back. And again, match in your notches like so. Again, we are here going to be sewing 3/8 of an inch inside of the raw edge. And then lastly with your back, grab your lining and press in the crease that we marked. I'm just going to do that now. I've now created my fold, as you can see there. And I'm going to extend out the notch from my waist, and I'm going to, with my ruler, long ruler over here, connect the top mark for where my centre back is, at the top of my centre back, to the bottom. I'm going to draw a line going all the way down. That can mark. Right. And then going to run a stitch going down my centre back. Before I do that, I'm going to grab my back pattern. I'm going to lay it back in. I'm going to mark where my nape is, and I'm going to mark a couple inches lower than that. Like so. And then I'm going to trace a line extending that mark a couple inches down, and I'm going to trace another line 1/4 of an inch up from the waistline that I'd marked. Now, what this allows me to do is to put a stitch line in and a basting line in. So the basting line is going to run down this initial long line going all the way. We'll put that in now. Starting at the top and just working your way down all the way. And once you get to the bottom, make a little tack. We're then going to put a stitch line in, and the stitch line is going to be as follows. It's going to start at the top here, head down, and it's going to stop at this intersection here. It's then going to come in and stop an 1/8 in from the fold edge. An 1/8 in from the fold edge, we're going to go all the way down. We're going to come back out over here, across 1/4, and back down an 1/8 in from the fold edge, and then run that all the way down an 1/8 in again. I'll repeat that one more time. We're going to come at the top here, in, into an 1/8 in from the fold edge, all the way down, out, across this rectangle, back in an 1/8 from the fold edge, and run all the way down. Once you've done that, you can then open this up and press the basted line open. I've now sewn the stitch line in the centre back of my lining, and you'll be able to tell here. So this is the nape here. I've come down, out, an 1/8 in, all the way down, up until I reach the waist, where I've come out and in again, and then all the way down again, right up to the bottom, and my baseline is running straight all the way along. Now, my next step is to press these over, and then they're done. So I will press my baseline out, like so. I will then press my forearm and hind arm. Now typically on linings we don't press these seams open, we press them over to one side. So you would press this flat and push it with the iron to one side. As you're doing so, make sure that you're pulling nice and tight to make sure that you're not creating any creases and that you are pressing open on the seam stitch line. The same applies to this side here. Again, pressing over nicely all the way down, and exactly the same on the forepart. Opening this up and pressing the seam over to one side. So here we have our lining forepart pressed out. The direction in which you press the seam allowances is of no consequence on the forepart or on the sleeve, so long as you are just pressing them to the same side on left and right. So here I press the seams going to the back, which gives a rise on the side body. Here is your sleeve. Leave this inside out, as I have it here. Again, seams pressed over. Now the only location where the direction in which you press over your seams can have an importance where tradition is being considered is on your centre back. In traditionally masculine tailoring, seams are wrapped left over right, which is what I've done here, whereas in feminine tailoring, seams are wrapping right over left.